Now let's go ahead and start out with one of the traditional solar lights. I'm going to go ahead and take a piece of floral foam, and I'm removing the top part of the light, and I'm just going to add that to the floral foam so it has a nice sturdy base to sit on. Once we've removed the solar light from the top of that, I'm going to add a little bit of these fragment effects. These are glass chips into the little case where the light shines through. And I'm just doing red, white, and blue for this one, and I'm just going to mix them up a little bit. Now do be careful if you touch these with your hands. They are a little bit sharp. I have not cut myself with them, but I could see somebody cutting themselves with them. Next, I'm just going to pour in some of the resin, and realizing that this is very thick with the layers of the glass in here, I am going to pour just a little bit of resin in. I'll take a little popsicle stick here, and I'm just going to kind of mix the resin in with the glass beads. And I'm going to keep repeating this step until everything is coated. Next, I'm just going to pour enough resin in at the top to give it a nice top where it's nice and smooth. You want to make sure you leave enough headspace to be able to reattach your light. And to remove any of the air bubbles on top of the resin, I'm using my heat tool, but a hairdryer would also work. And you just warm up the resin until all the bubbles pop. Next, you go ahead and let this dry overnight. The next day, you just remove your piece from your floral foam and add your light. Now just put together your little solar light, and it's ready to display. Now this piece is ready to add to your garden. I'm going to add it to a little floral pot here. I love the extra sparkle it gives. Grab yourself some yarn and a USA sign from the Dollar Tree, and let's make this over into a beautiful piece. I'm going to start out by just removing the hanger and all of the tinsel from the USA sign. Next, I'm going to grab my red, white, and blue yarn that I got at the Dollar Tree, and I'm going to wrap that yarn around each one of these letters. And off camera, I did use a little bit of hot glue when I was going from one color to the next. So I would cut the red yarn, and then I'd use a little bit of hot glue to secure it to make sure that it wasn't going to fall off of our piece. And then I moved on to the white and then the blue. Next, I grabbed this patriotic ribbon from the Dollar Tree, and I absolutely love this blue ribbon. So if you can find it, it is really high quality ribbon. I really like it. And I am going to use it as my hanger. So I'm just going to thread that through the little hook that's on this USA sign. Then we'll trim the ribbon and tie that together. And this is going to be the perfect hanger to add it to our wreath. And now this USA sign is ready to hang, and you can hang it just the way it is, or from season to season, I do like to change out my wreath on the front door, and this wreath is just very generic, but you can take this embellishment and add it right on top. And I've done this for multiple seasons, and I just really love how this turns out, giving a wreath a totally different look for each season. So these little metal signs are a staple at the Dollar Tree. So I grabbed one, and I'm going to decoupage on it a patriotic napkin. I found this napkin at Home Goods. And to prep our napkin, I'm going to go ahead and remove the back 2 layers of this napkin. Now you may be wondering, how is she going to decoupage this on such an uneven surface? Well, that is a great question. And I'm going to show you how, so you can do this with no wrinkles and have a beautiful patriotic hanger for the season. So for this piece, I am only going to be using one of the quadrants of this napkin. So I'm taking a little paintbrush with some water, and I'm just going to paint around the corner that I'd like to use. And because there isn't a red border around the whole piece, on that little piece of the napkin, I am going to remove that border as well. And if you take the napkin and just tear it around the outside edge where you've wet down the napkin, it'll remove really simple. And while doing this, it allows the napkin to fade into the piece a lot easier than if you cut it with scissors. And I'm not sure if this helps or not, but I tend to dry my napkin first before I decoupage it. Now for this next step, I'm just going to eyeball it. I'm taking my Waverly chalk paint in the color Plaster, and I'm going to paint a little square on the center of my piece with that paint. Now painting is totally optional. I like to paint underneath my napkins typically because it really allows the napkin to be like vibrant in color. It stands out a little bit more. But if you don't want that look and want it to be more of a matte or muted color and it would fade more into your piece, you can do no paint underneath the napkin and it will give it a totally different look. Now I did do that in one of my videos previously if you want to see the contrast of that, and I'll link that above here for you to be able to watch after this video. So to decoupage on something that has a variegated surface, I like this technique. I'm taking my napkin and I'm putting it face down on a piece of cling wrap. Next, I'm going to take my Mod Podge and I'm going to paint that Mod Podge over the top of the painted area on this piece. And for this piece, I'm using matte Mod Podge, but glossy would work fine if you have that as well. And next, I'm just going to paint a nice coat over the top of the paint on this variegated metal. And while the Mod Podge is still wet, I'm going to take that piece of cling wrap and I'm going to gently lay down our napkin. Next, I grabbed a dry paintbrush. Yes, you heard me right, a dry paintbrush. And I'm just going to paint over the top of the cling wrap on top of that napkin. And it will allow us to just gently add that napkin into all of the creases into this metal piece. Then we're going to just remove the cling wrap and allow this to dry. Now once this has dried, I'm going to take my Mod Podge again and I'm going to do a nice coat over the top of the napkin to seal everything in. Now while our piece is drying, I want to make a messy bow. And I found that by taping down a piece of twine, it makes it a little bit easier to wrap that around my bow to tie everything into place. Next, I just stacked up my ribbon and a little bit of fabric that I had onto this little piece of twine. And in case you're wondering, none of these ribbons had wire in them. I find that with messy bows, I like the look of the floppier look to it. So I don't end up putting ribbon with wire typically in my messy bows. Now you can see me here. I just take the tape off of the counter here and I'm just going to tie my little bow right in the center. Now here is what my bow looks like. You could keep the ends here, the twine on the back, and use that as a way to tie it onto something. However, for this piece, I'm not going to be tying it on, so I'm going to cut this off because I'm going to hot glue this onto my piece. Now here you see me trying to figure out how I want to cover the center of my bow. I could just leave it the way it is, but I decided that I ended up liking a button in the center, so that is what I'm going to be doing for my piece. Next, I'm just going to put everything together, and using some hot glue, I'm going to add that bow right to the center at the top, and then I'll use a little bit more hot glue to add that button to the center of my bow. And now our patriotic hanger is complete and ready to hang for the season. I just love how this turns out. It has such a fun rustic feel to it, but definitely screams red, white, and blue. And if you're enjoying this content, please consider hitting that like, subscribe, or share button below. Thank you. I really love this yarn at Dollar Tree, and I'm going to be using the red, white, and blue for this piece. I'm also going to be using this wreath that I found at Dollar Tree, but if you can't find one there, Hobby Lobby and Walmart tend to have these quite often. For our first step, we're going to go ahead and unwrap our yarn a little bit and then tie all 3 strands together. Next, I'm just going to take my yarn and weave this into my wreath. And I'm just going to tie that around a piece of the wreath that I feel like might be in the back side of the wreath. I'm not sure, you don't really see it, so it's not that big of a deal. Now, once you've done that, we're going to take this yarn and start wrapping it all the way around the wreath. And while I'm wrapping this around the wreath, I'm trying to keep the yarn flat so it still has that red, white, and blue line going through. And with the magic of video, our wreath is fully wrapped. So when we do that last wrap, I am going to leave a few inches of yarn available for me to be able to tie that back to our wreath. Next, I grabbed this ribbon, and I found it this year at Dollar Tree, and I love this ribbon. I used it in my earlier craft, and I just really liked how it lays and how it looks. So we're going to do that again for this one, and I'm going to make a hanger for our wreath. And one thing I'm trying to show you that I'm doing is I'm covering up where I put the knot on my wreath, so that way you won't see it because it'll be covered by our hanger. And for this hanger, I am doing a full knot on the top of the wreath, and then I'll go ahead and take the strands, and you could leave them as they are and then tie them wherever you'd like to hang it. But for me, I'm just going to make a little knot here so I'll have a loop so it'll be easier to hang. Now it's time to add some embellishments. The first thing I'm going to do is tape down this little wood star and paint it with my Waverly chalk paint in the color white. Now while that is drying, I'm going to grab my blue ribbon that I used earlier, some of that burlap polka dot ribbon you can find at the Dollar Tree, and the little berries that I've also found at the Dollar Tree, but you can also get those at Hobby Lobby, and I've also seen them on Amazon. So once I've done a quick fit check of the size of the bow that I want for my wreath, I'm going to go ahead and set the wreath aside and start making our bow. So this is really simple. I'm going to just lay out each section of this bow until I have all the different layers, and then we're going to attach them in the center using a pipe cleaner. So I'm going to start out with the burlap polka dot bow. Then I'm going to take those little berries and I'm going to make a shape of a bow as well and put that over the top. Next, we'll go ahead and add that blue ribbon over the top of the berries. And to give it just a little bit more oomph, I'm going to add another layer of those berries. Now what I found was taking one layer at a time and smushing them together in my fingers. And then I'm just going to add each layer on top again. So it'll be a little bit easier for me to add that pipe cleaner around the center. So now that I have all of these in my hand, I'm going to take that pipe cleaner and just wrap that right around the center of that bow. And then you can twist or tie whatever is easier for you on the back side. Now I just hold the bow in the center and I fluff out all of my ribbons and make sure everything is how I would like it. Now to cover the pipe cleaner in the center, I am going to take a small piece of twine and wrap that around the center of my bow. And now that our bow is complete, let's go ahead and attach that to the hanger of our wreath. I'm going to go ahead and just flip this bow around, and then we're going to take the pipe cleaner and that twine and tie it around the back side of our hanger at the top of the wreath. And to make sure everything stays into place, I did add a little bit of hot glue underneath my bow so it would lay perfectly where I wanted it on the wreath. And now for our final embellishment, we're going to add that star we painted earlier and hot glue it right to the center of our bow. And wow, I just love how this wreath turns out. Everything other than the paint and the glue were from the Dollar Tree. This was such a fun piece to make, and it's so high-end looking. Let me know what you think about it in the comments below. Let's start this craft out with a canvas from the Dollar Tree. And what I like about the Dollar Tree is they have some of these unique shaped canvases in their decor area. And you know, you can make these over however you'd like. So if you don't find the shape that you like in the Crafter Square section, just head over to the decor section and grab a canvas from there. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to start out by removing the staples from the back side of this canvas. And I'm just using a flat screwdriver and some pliers to do this. And I'm going to go ahead and remove the hook also from the back side of this canvas, and we can reattach this later to hang our project. Next, we're just going to separate the frame from the canvas. And once we have our frame and canvas detached, I'm going to take this canvas piece and I'm going to flatten it out and lay it down onto a piece of cardboard. Using some painter's tape, I'm going to secure it so it'll be easier for us to redo our canvas. Now that everything is secure, I'm going to take my Waverly chalk paint in the color Plaster, and we're going to do a nice coat of paint over the top of this canvas. Now, while everything is drying, I grabbed these letters that I got at Walmart and a heart that I had in my stash from the Dollar Tree. And I'm just going to tape these down onto a piece of cardboard so they're easier to paint. And I decided to use my chalk paint from Folk Art for the letters. And I'm going to paint them in this color called Nautical Nautique. For my heart, I'm going to paint it with my Waverly chalk paint in the color Red and Truffle. And to do this, I'm just going to mix a little bit of that truffle color paint in with my red, just to darken it up a little bit and give it more of a burgundy red look. Now, while that piece is drying, we're going to go back to our frame, and I'm using my antique Waverly wax, and we're going to just stain our frame. And if you haven't done this before, I'm just adding a little bit of the wax to my frame, and then I'm taking a baby wipe and I'm just wiping it down. This will just give it a nice rich color since we're going to see this frame for this piece. So I have this beautiful napkin in my stash, and I did get this at Home Goods last July, and I didn't get a chance to use it in my crafts last year, so I'm excited to be using it today. What I'm first going to do is prep my napkin. And so to prep my napkin, I'm taking a piece of painter's tape and I'm going to remove the back 2 layers from the napkin. And yes, that is a spot in the napkin, but since I don't need the full napkin, I decided to not waste this napkin because of the imperfection, and we're just going to use a different portion of the napkin. And to make this easier to work with, I am just going to cut the napkin in half and use 1/2 of the napkin. Now let's go back to our canvas. Using some Mod Podge and matte, I'm going to brush some Mod Podge over the top of our canvas. And once we have a nice layer of Mod Podge, I'm going to let this dry. When everything is dry, we'll go ahead and lay down our napkin on the top of our Mod Podge. Next, we're going to put a layer of parchment paper over the top of the napkin. Now I'm using a heat press here, but you can use just a regular hot iron. And you just iron this right onto the canvas. And this is going to stick amazing and you'll have no wrinkles. It's a great technique to use for Mod Podge. Off camera, I did seal the napkin in with another coat of Mod Podge. Once everything has completely dried, I took my frame and I just placed it over the top of my canvas. Then positioned it where I wanted it over the top of that napkin, just so I had the pattern the way I would like to see it. Now let's grab a pencil and go ahead and trace the perimeter of our frame. Once we have that traced, we can go ahead and take a pair of scissors and just cut out the canvas. And now that we have our canvas cut out, we're going to go ahead and make sure everything fits with our frame. Next, I'm going to grab some of my Titebond Quick and Thick glue, and I'm going to put that on the back side of my frame. And to ensure that the glue lays flat, once I've applied my Titebond glue, I'm going to take a paintbrush. I'm just going to paint the glue all along the frame so it's a nice flat surface. Then I'm going to just lay my canvas down on top of our frame. And now to ensure that everything stays into place, I did grab my staple gun and I'm just going to add a few staples around the frame. And now for the fun part, let's put everything together. I'm going to start out by taking a small twine bow and I'm just going to hot glue that to my heart to cover up the hole that was there for hanging. Now, before I glue anything into place, I do like to position everything on my piece first, and I decided I wanted to start with the heart and then go USA. But you can do it in whatever order you'd like. I just thought this looked really nice. Once I have everything positioned, I take one piece at a time and I just go ahead and glue this back onto the canvas. I'm using my hot glue, but you could also use your Titebond glue if you'd prefer. And once we have everything glued on, your piece is ready to display. Now, depending on how you want to display this, you may want to reattach the hook that came on here previously. I was going to be standing this up as a leaner, so I decided to save that hook for a future project, but you do whatever works best for you. And I just love how this turns out. It has a rustic feel, and it's something that you can put out for the holidays, for Memorial Day, or for 4th of July, or any time if you'd like to just put out patriotic decor. So run to the Dollar Tree and find these stars. These are amazing. I am so glad that I grabbed them when I did, because when I went a few days later, they were sold out. So I grabbed one of each, the red, white, and blue, and then I grabbed 2 of the signs. And I'm going to take one of these boards that I have at the house. It's 25 inches or a little bit over 25, and it's right underneath 6 inches in width. Next, I'm going to take my Waverly Antique Wax, and I'm going to just stain my board. Now, if you don't want to use the Waverly Antique Wax, that's fine. You can just use whatever stain works best with your decor. Next, we're going to start deconstructing our stars. And to do this, I'm just taking a flathead screwdriver and I'm just going to pry that underneath the staple and use a pair of pliers to pull them out. Now, I've seen other crafters use some other tool for this, and if you have a better suggestion for taking out staples, please drop me a note down below so I can start looking at investing in a different tool for this. But this does work just fine, and these are staple items that I have at the house to be able to remove staples. For this craft, we're only going to be using the stars, so I am going to save the tassels and the beads to use in a future craft. Next, I grabbed the tags with the 2 wood stars attached, and I'm going to deconstruct them as well because I would like one of each of the color of the star, so a red, white, and a blue. And then I'm going to save the tags and the beads again for future crafts. I'm kind of thinking I might do something with Christmas with those tags, so you might see something in Christmas in July for that. Question for all of you, where are you guys from? I'm here in Washington State. Let me know where you're from in the comments below. So now that we have a red, white, and blue solid star and the decorative stars, we are going to put this onto our board. And once I have the decorative stars aligned the way I would like them on the board, I grab a pencil and I'm just going to mark a little dot on the board where I would like these stars to go. Now let's grab our Type Bond Quick and Thick glue, and we're going to take one star off at a time. And I just add a little bit of glue to the back side of the star, and then using my paintbrush, I'm going to spread around that glue. And this will help me get into all the different spots on the star without making too big of a mess. Now, this first star, I did go a little bit heavier than I thought I did on the glue. So here is a tip. If you start seeing that glue going outside of where you would like it, I just took a paintbrush with some water on it, and I just kind of blended that glue right into the frame. I'm not worried about the glue on the inside of the star because it's going to dry clear, and we're going to be covering it with our other star. But I wanted the outside edges to look perfect, and so this little tip helps out a lot. And now that our first set of stars are glued into place, we're going to take our next set of stars and we're going to do the exact same thing using our Type Bond Quick and Thick glue. And I'm just going to put a little bit of glue on the back side of the star. And then I'm going to use a tiny bit of hot glue as well, just to get that immediate hold. Next, I'll go ahead and flip this star over and center it onto our coordinating star. And now let's just repeat that same step for the remaining 2 stars. And wow, our piece is complete. I just love how this turns out. It's such a stunning piece. It's very rustic, but so easy to do. Let me know what you think about it in the comments below. And if you're enjoying this content, please consider hitting that like, subscribe button below, or share it with a friend. And if you've already subscribed, thank you so much for helping my channel grow. I really appreciate it. Thank you. Let's decoupage with window clings. Yes, that's right, window clings. I'm also going to be using a paper napkin for this craft and this adorable little sign that my friend at Robin's Crafts Unleashed gave me. This is from Dollar General, and I'm here in the Pacific Northwest and I do not have a Dollar General. So I was so happy she sent me this great care package with a whole bunch of fun pieces from Dollar General. If you've never checked out Robin's channel, I have a link for her down in my description box below. Go check her out and give her some love. So to start out, I'm just using some painter's tape and I'm taping the metal piece so I don't get any paint on it. Next, I'm taking my Waverly chalk paint in the color Plaster and I'm going to give a nice coat of paint right over the top of the piece. Now, while that was drying, I picked out a window cling, Life, Liberty, and the Pursuit of Happiness. And I have a wood coaster here, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to trace the window cling onto the wood coaster. Next, I'm going to take a razor blade and I'm going to cut my wood coaster out to fit my window cling. And if you don't want to use a razor blade, you could use miter shears as well. Next, I grab my zip sander and I'm just going to sand around the edges of my little coaster. Next, I'm going to tape this down to a paintable surface, and using my Waverly chalk paint in the color Plaster, I'm going to do a nice quick coat of paint over the top. While that dries, we'll go back to our canning jar base. Using Mod Podge in matte, I'm going to do a nice coat of Mod Podge over the top of the paint. Then we're going to let that Mod Podge dry. Now let's go back to our little wood piece. I'm using my super matte Mod Podge. Yes, super matte Mod Podge. This is key with window clings and decoupaging because it takes all the shine away. So while that Mod Podge is still wet, we are going to apply the window cling. And to do this, I'm going to use some saran wrap to assist me. So once we've laid down the window cling, I take that saran wrap and I'm just going to press down and make sure that everything is wrinkle free. I actually did grab my roller as well and I just rolled that into place. There is absolutely no wrinkles on this and this looks amazing. Now while everything is drying, I did decide to prep my napkin. So to do that, I am just going to unfold it and remove the back 2 layers. Next, I just cut out a smaller piece of the napkin so it's easier to work with on my piece. Now I'm going to lay that piece of napkin right over the top of our piece. And I do kind of lift up that metal piece a little bit so I can just get that napkin tucked underneath just so it hits right at the edge of that canning jar. Now let's go ahead and grab a piece of parchment paper and lay that right on top of our napkin. And using a heat press, or you could use a hot iron, I'm just going to iron this right on top. This will activate the Mod Podge so that the napkin sticks perfectly. And using the iron keeps all the wrinkles away. Now go ahead and grab your Mod Podge again. I'm going to be using the matte Mod Podge for this, and I'll just go ahead and do a sealing coat over the top of the napkin. Now grab your super matte Mod Podge, and we're going to go ahead and do a sealing coat on top of our window cling. And like I said earlier, this sealing coat will take away any shine that might be left on that window cling. It is perfect for making any sort of window cling look amazing. Now going back to our canning jar, I'm going to take my zip sander and I'm just going to sand in a downward motion to remove any excess napkin. Once we've completed this step, we'll go ahead and remove that painter's tape. And now that all of our components are complete, let's put everything together. To attach our little life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, I am going to use my Titebond quick and thick glue with a little bit of hot glue. And I'm just going to center this on my piece. Next, I'm just going to take a small bead of hot glue and I'm just going to put that right at the top of my canning jar, and I'll go ahead and add that little twine bow for the finishing touch. And wow, this piece turned out amazing. You would have no idea that I used a window cling for this. I love the rustic farmhouse feel to this piece. I think this will go great with my patriotic decor. So here are some fun things you can do with window clings to decorate your picnic space for the season. One of the things that I like using these window clings on are on non-traditional items. So these metal buckets from the Dollar Tree are a great piece that you can add a window cling to and change it up for the season. Another great piece to add window clings to are these essential utility caddies. And I found these at the Dollar Tree and they have them in lots of different colors for the season. And you can just add your window cling onto these as well. This will be a great piece for your picnic or barbecue. So just add your condiments in here or your utensils and napkins and you are all set. Such a fun way to change things up using window clings not on a window. And who doesn't love some fun solar lights? Let's make this up to be a patriotic light set. Using some holiday berry, blue, and white from my gallery glass paints, we're going to go ahead and just paint our little lights. If you haven't used these paints before, they are great. They go on kind of like puffy paint, but not quite as thick. And what I'm doing here is I'm just going to do some alternating squares where I do blue, then red, then white. And don't worry, it looks pink right now. It will turn red once this completely dries. So I'm going to complete this pattern on all four sides of this light. And I'm going to make two matching lights because I'm going to use them on my front porch, one in each planter on either side of my front door. Now, once you're done painting these, set them aside to dry overnight. And here is what they'll look like in the morning. Now, once you take these outside, they look amazing. I love these two napkins so much that I'm going to put them both together for this next craft. Once we remove the back 2 layers of one of the white napkins and one of the red napkins, I'm going to use the water method to just tear apart the 4 quadrants of the napkin. And for this project, I'm going to need 2 white quadrants and 2 red quadrants. So a few weeks ago, I found these all white fabric bags at the Dollar Tree. So I snagged one of these because I thought this would be a fun project to decoupage. And after I ironed the bag, I inserted a piece of cardboard into the bag. This cardboard inside that bag is going to keep it from sticking to each other when we're using the Mod Podge. And I'm using the fabric Mod Podge, and I'm just going to paint a rectangle that will be big enough for 2 of the pieces of napkin to fit onto. And while this is still wet, we're going to take one of the pieces of napkin and place that very carefully on the top. And then I'll align a second napkin underneath. And I'm alternating napkins here where I did the red one on the top and then the little white one on the bottom. To make sure that these stick down, I actually take a small piece of cling wrap and I wrap that around my fingers, and I just use that to tap down the napkin, which helps me keep from tearing any of that napkin. If you notice anything that's not sticking down, you can take that Mod Podge and the brush and just brush anything back down. And now while that's drying, I'm going to do the other side. I'll do another rectangle and we'll just repeat the same steps. Now once this is completely dry, I am going to take that fabric Mod Podge and use it as a sealer over the top of these napkins. And now for an added touch. I found these window clings at the Dollar Tree, and I really liked the one that said freedom. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put that window cling on the top of our little bag here. And to put this on, I didn't want it to look different because it is kind of that glossy finish. So I used my Super Matte Mod Podge, and I'm going to just paint a little rectangle down and then place our window cling on top. And now once that is completely dry, I'll go over that window cling with that matte Mod Podge. And this is the Super Matte Mod Podge. And we'll let that dry. Now here's our finished bag. I think this shopping bag is adorable and very patriotic. I definitely will be using it the next time I go grocery shopping. And if you're enjoying this content and want to see more, please consider hitting that subscribe button below. It really helps my channel grow. Thank you. So I just love burlap, and these burlap canvases are just so much fun to make up and do things with. I got this one at the Dollar Tree, and I flipped it over, and I'm just taking a screwdriver and a pair of pliers to remove all of the staples from the back. Now I saw Brenda over at Rustic and Lace do something similar with a canvas, and so I thought I would try it with doing a burlap canvas and doing something a little bit different than what she did. So thank you, Brenda, for the inspiration. We have all of those staples removed. We can remove the burlap from this canvas frame. Now I'm going to set this aside and prep my napkin. And this napkin I fell in love with. Wondering where I get a lot of my napkins, I tend to find a lot at Home Goods. I do get a few on Amazon, and I also get some at TJ Maxx sometimes. Anywhere I see napkins, I try and look at them and see if I find any I'd like to decoupage with. And so what you see me doing here is I am just removing the back 2 layers of this napkin, and I use a little piece of tape, and I usually use painter's tape, and I just pull those layers off. Now we're going to take this napkin, and I'm going to use the water method here and a paintbrush. And so all we're doing is we're just painting the water around the area that we want to tear apart. And so I just want one of the quadrants from this napkin for my canvas. Now that our napkin is prepped, let's go back to that piece of burlap. And what I'm doing here is I'm just going to lay it out flat, and instead of taping it down to this piece of cardboard, I'm just going to use some little clips that I have from the Dollar Tree. Now, once everything is stable and in place, I'm going to grab my Waverly chalk paint in my favorite color, plaster, and we're just going to paint a nice coat of plaster paint over the top of the canvas. And I'm using my heat tool to get the drying process started, but you could just let this air dry if you'd like. I'm moving back to our wood frame. I'm going to set this down on a paintable surface, and I'm using my Antique Wax by Waverly, and I just go ahead and I stain the whole entire frame. Next, I have these window clings that I got at the Dollar Tree, and I've been using for some of my patriotic crafts, and I like the one that says USA. So what we're going to do here is we're going to be decoupaging with the window cling and with the napkin. And don't worry about that window cling. It is not going to look like a window cling when we're done. It's actually going to look amazing. And I'll show you my trick here in a minute. So to start off our decoupage, we're going to be using some of our matte Mod Podge, and I'm just going to paint a coat of that Mod Podge over the top of the painted area. Now grab your napkin and go ahead and just lay that over the top of the wet Mod Podge. Now I'm going to add some cling wrap over the top of that napkin, and this helps you get all of the wrinkles out of that napkin on top of that Mod Podge. And I'm using my little Mod Podge roller here just to make sure everything goes into place. Now you're going to see me just putting a little bit more Mod Podge down at that bottom underneath the flags. And that is where we're going to place the USA cling. And once we have that in place, we will use the same technique with the piece of cling wrap and the roller. So here is my trick. Super matte Mod Podge. Yes, that's right. Super matte Mod Podge. This stuff is amazing. You just place this over the top of anything that's glossy. This works really good on window clings. And it takes all of that gloss away. And this looks just like it's part of the napkin. So if you're interested in this Mod Podge, I will leave a link in my description box below. Once everything is dry, we're going to remove those pink clips and we are going to frame our USA sign. So we're going to take that frame that we stained earlier and we're going to place it over the top of the USA. And once we have our frame in the place that we would like it, all I'm going to do is take a pencil and I'm going to draw around the outside of the frame. Then we're going to cut all of the excess burlap off. Now to attach this to the frame. Once we are sure that everything fits, I'm going to take my Aleene's tacky glue, and I've seen this at the Dollar Tree and at a lot of different craft stores. It's pretty easy to find, and I'm just going to glue around the outside of the back side of the frame. And then we're just going to place that USA sign right on top of it. And once I'm confident that the glue is going to stick okay, I do grab my staple gun and I add 4 staples, 1 in each corner, just to be sure everything stays into place. Now we could stop here and just leave the sign alone, but you know, I want to add a little bit more. So I'm going to take this ribbon, and I really like this ribbon. I got this at Ben Franklin. I'm going to make this simple bow. And what I do is I get 2 loops going and make the shape of a bow with the ribbon. And using a pipe cleaner, I just go ahead and I wrap that around the center there. And that gives the bow its shape. Now, once that is completely done, you can either cut the extra pieces of the pipe cleaner or you could just twist it into place in the back and hide it. You can leave the bow like this. I'm going to dovetail my ends. And then after that, what I like to do is I cut about an inch, inch and a half piece of the ribbon, and I take it and I'm going to fold it into thirds. And I fold it on the inside of itself, so then that way you don't see the edges, you just see the center piece of that ribbon. And now let's go ahead and just wrap that piece of ribbon around the pipe cleaner, and using some hot glue, I attach everything in the back of the ribbon. I just pinch that in the center and fluff everything out, and now we have a beautiful rustic bow to go on our sign. And to attach the ribbon, I'm just going to use a little bead of hot glue right there in the center on the top. And now our Farmhouse Rustic USA sign is all ready to display. This is one of my favorite patriotic signs I've made this year. I just think this turns out so amazing. And if you're enjoying this content, I'd really appreciate it if you hit that subscribe button below. Thank you. So if you like burlap, the Dollar Tree has pretty much been rocking it this last few years on having a lot of variety on different burlap. And right now they do have a red, white, and blue. So I got one of each. And I unrolled all of these and noticed that there are a ton of wrinkles in this. So what I'm going to do is I'm using a spray bottle with some water, and I'm just going to spray down my burlap. Now grab a hot iron, and using it on the high setting, just iron out all of those wrinkles. And I just repeated this for all 3 pieces of burlap. And now that we have all of those ironed out flat, I grabbed this fun star-shaped dish at the thrift store and a chalk pencil from the Dollar Tree. And we're just going to use this dish as a stencil on top of our burlap. Now once you have your 2 stars traced out, I grabbed some scissors and I'm just going to roughly cut around the star shape. I'm not going to do a nice finished cut. Next, I grabbed some polyfill and my hot glue gun. And what we're going to do is we're going to hot glue around the chalk and we're going to mash up the pieces together. After I did this step, I realized that why did I trace out 2 stars? I only need to trace 1 out. So on my next 2 stars, I'm only going to trace out 1. But we're going to just do this hot glue all the way around, but leave a small opening just big enough for us to be able to stuff polyfill into our star. And I found it was easier to just add a little bit at a time and make sure we got everything into the corners of those stars. And now that that's complete, we'll just take some more hot glue and close up our star. Now grab your scissors and just trim around our star. This gives it a really nice and rustic look. So now that we have this trimmed out, I'm going to just hot glue a cute twine bow to our star. Moving on to our blue burlap. I found these adorable stencils at the Dollar Tree, and I taped a piece of blue burlap onto a paintable surface. And using these stencils, I'm taping them down with some blue painter's tape on top of the burlap. Next, I'm going to grab my Waverly chalk paint in the color plaster, and we're just going to stencil some stars all over this piece of burlap. And I used a variety of sizes of stars, some small, medium, and a large one in the center. And when I'm stenciling on burlap, I like to use a sponge brush. And now we're going to repeat the same steps as we did for our red pillow. I use some hot glue and trace over the star, and then we'll attach the second piece of burlap. Now we'll grab some polyfill and fill this pillow up and hot glue it together. And now that our blue rustic star is complete, let's move on to our white burlap. For this one, we're just going to grab some red Waverly chalk paint and paint some stripes over the top of the burlap. Then we'll just continue on to make our cute rustic star. And for this one, it did turn out pretty rustic, so I grabbed some twine and I just wrapped it around the star and tied a quick little bow to give it a little bit better points on the star. Now our stars are complete. I think these turned out adorable. They're a rustic little piece that you can add to a tier tray or to a basket for a pop of red, white, and blue. So I'm always on the hunt for a great napkin. And I found this napkin the other day on Amazon. We're going to start out by just prepping our napkin so that we can decoupage it. And all we have to do this is unfold the napkin, and I grab a little piece of painter's tape, and it helps me take the back 2 layers of the napkin off. Instead of cutting this napkin, I'm going to use the water method, and I'm just taking a little bit of water on a paintbrush, and I'm just going to take that paintbrush and draw around each one of these quadrants. And we're just going to tear the napkin apart And this allows the napkin to tear easy. And then once I get ready to decoupage it, I make sure my napkin is completely dry before I decoupage. And for the outer edges, I'm just going to do the same thing. I'm just going to lightly coat them with some water and then just do a little bit of a tear on this napkin. And I'll set that aside for a minute to dry. And I found this beautiful piece of fabric at the Dollar Tree. It's just like an eyelet kind of white fabric. And it looks almost like lace, but it's not quite lace. And I'm going to just take my heat press here and do a quick iron on it and get some of the wrinkles out. Now I have this board from the Dollar Tree that's been sitting in my stash for a while. You've probably seen these a lot at the Dollar Tree lately. They seem to have them almost all the time now. And they do come in handy for some of these home decor projects. And you see me here eyeballing how much fabric to cut. And I want to cut enough fabric that I can put this piece on the board, but have about 1/4 of an inch to 1/2 an inch on either side so that you still can see that board. And once we have our piece of fabric cut out, I am going to try to fray the edges on this because I want that to have more of a rustic look. So once I have that piece of fabric ready to go, I do place this on a plastic surface because I don't want it to stick to like cardboard. So this is just a piece of extra plastic that I had that was for some packaging, and it works really well for this kinds of things. Now I'm taking my napkin here and I realize that my napkin is more of a square shape, and so I need to make this more of a rectangle. So I'm just doing the same water method here and just trimming around the edges. It'll fit better on my piece of fabric. Next, I grab my super matte Mod Podge. I really want no sheen on this project, so that is why I'm using this Mod Podge, and it works amazing. So I'm doing a nice coat of the Mod Podge on top of the fabric. And then once I'm satisfied with my Mod Podge, I'm going to take that napkin and gently lay that on top of the Mod Podge. Next, I grabbed a piece of cling wrap and I'll lay that right on top. And I just use my brailer here to roll everything into place. Now carefully remove that piece of cling wrap before anything starts to dry. And I don't want this to stick onto anything, so I actually just clip this onto a holder on my shelf and just let that air dry that way. Now once that piece has completely dry, I grab my super matte Mod Podge and my board, and we're going to just Mod Podge this fabric piece so that we'll be able to glue this onto the board. Now let's grab that cling wrap again and put another layer over the top of this piece of fabric, and I'll use my roller or my brailer to just pat everything down and put everything into place. And don't forget to remove that piece of cling wrap when you're done doing that. And now to seal this napkin in, we are going to put a coat of Mod Podge over the top of the napkin piece only. So if you haven't checked out your office supply area in the Dollar Tree, they tend to have some of these cute little push pens, and these work great for crafting. And I'm just going to remove the push pen, the sharp piece on it, using my pliers here. And I'm going to use these as little button caps. And what we're going to do is we're going to hot glue each one of these into the corner of each piece of the napkin here. And for our final embellishment, we'll hot glue a jute twine bow to the top. And I think this turns out so cute. All of these different textures give it so much dimension, and I just love how this turns out. What do you think? Let me know in the comments below. So here's another fun napkin that I found on Amazon. And if you're interested, I will link these napkins in my description box below if you like them. So I had a roll of burlap in my stash, and this burlap was from Walmart, and I cut a piece slightly larger than this piece of wood. And this wood I did get from the Dollar Tree. Now using my super matte Mod Podge, we're going to take a brush and just paint some of that Mod Podge in the inside of this piece of wood. So I start out by just making a rectangle shape and then filling that in with the Mod Podge. And we leave about a ½ inch around the outside of this Mod Podge. While the Mod Podge is still wet, I'm going to just lay down that piece of burlap over the top of the Mod Podge. And I'm just using my fingers here to tap this into place, and then I just went quickly over the top with my roller. And once I was done with that, I set this aside and didn't touch it for about a ½ hour, and I let this completely dry. So let's prep our napkin. And to prep our napkin, I'm just going to unwrap it, and using a little piece of painter's tape, we can remove the back 2 layers. Now we are going to use the water method on this as well, and I'm just going to take my paintbrush and run a little bit of water around the quadrants of this napkin and go ahead and tear each square out. Now that our burlap has completely dried, I'm going to take some scissors and I'm just going to trim a little bit around the edge of the burlap. And I don't want to trim all of the burlap off. I'm just going to trim the exterior of that piece of wood. And then once we're satisfied, I'm going to go around the outside edge and we're just going to fray that burlap and just pulling strings until we get to where the glue is on that piece of wood. Once we're completely satisfied, we're going to do a quick fit check with our napkin. And I realized that this napkin was just slightly too wide, so we're just going to use that water method again and trim it up. Now, I set that on top of the piece of burlap, and I'm just going to eyeball where it was at. And using my Waverly chalk paint in the color white, we're going to paint a square where the napkin is going to go. And once that's completely dry, let's grab our super matte Mod Podge, and we're just going to paint over the white square with the Mod Podge. While the Mod Podge is still wet, we're going to lay out our napkin on top, and then we'll put a layer of cling wrap over the top of the napkin. And using our roller, we'll roll everything into place. And once this is completely dry, we're going to seal this in with the same Mod Podge, the super matte. Now for some final embellishments. I'm using some hot glue and some buttons, and I really like these blue buttons that I had in my stash, but I only had 2. So what I'm going to do is just alternate these, doing blue, then blue, and red again. Now that's it for this cute little craft. I love how this turns out. I'm not sure which one I like better, if I like the red one or the white one. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Now we're going to make a really cute shelf sitter or something that you can put on a tiered tray. And I'm starting out with this red napkin, and we're just going to remove the back 2 layers. And I did find these napkins on Amazon, so I'll put a link down in my description box below. Next, I'm going to take a piece of scrapped wood, and we're going to take our Waverly Antique Wax and just stain this piece of wood on both sides. To do this, I just put a quick layer of the wax over the whole entire piece, and I use a baby wipe and wipe that clean. And now that that's complete and dry, we're going to take our Waverly chalk paint in the color Plaster. And I'm taking a dry brush, and I'm just going to dry brush on both sides of this piece of wood. And I really just want to do a really light coat of this paint on here. And now I grab my super matte Mod Podge, but you can use whatever Mod Podge you have. And I'm just going to paint a layer on one side of this piece of wood. Speed this along, I did use my heat tool to just lightly dry over the top of this Mod Podge just to give it a head start. And once that's completely dry, I am going to place my napkin over the top of this piece of wood. Next, I grab a piece of parchment paper and I just lay that over the top of the napkin. And now using an iron, I'm just going to iron over the top. And what this is going to do is allow that Mod Podge to warm up so that the napkin will adhere. Next, we just remove that piece of parchment paper, and I grab my zip sander and I sand off any excess napkin. If you don't have a zip sander, a sanding block or an emery board would work just fine. Next, I'm going to take that super matte Mod Podge again, and I'm going to just do a sealing coat over the top of the napkin. And now that that's completely dry, I grabbed these fun stickers, and I found these stickers at Walmart. And I love this one that just says USA, but it has those little like poofy dots on the back, and I want to take those off because I want this to be more flush on my piece. So I did that, and then those stars that were on the side were really bright and weren't really going to go with my farmhouse look, so I'm just going to cover those with a little bit of plaster paint. Once that is complete, I'm just going to flip this over and I add a little bit of Mod Podge to the back side of the sticker since we took the sticker pieces off. And now I'm going to place this onto my piece, and I'm going to put this right underneath those flowers, making it look like it's hanging from that little flower box. So now I want to distress this a little bit. So I'm using my Burnt Umber Apple Barrel Matte Paint, and I'm just going to take a dry brush and go around the outside edges of this piece. And then I add just a little bit in the center over the top of the sticker, just to get it to where I think it will look good. Now once that is dry, we just flip this piece over and we're going to do the other side. So I'm taking those window clings that I got from the Dollar Tree, and I found this one that says proud to be an American. And I found with these window clings, I really like the matte finish on the Mod Podge, and I'm using the super matte finish for this one because I really want to take that shine away from that window cling to make it look like it's painted on to the surface. And once we have a nice coat of Mod Podge on our piece of wood, I'm going to just set that window cling very carefully over the top. And now I'll take a piece of cling wrap and place that over the top of the window cling, and using my roller, we'll just roll that piece right onto that Mod Podge. And now to seal this in, we are going to go back over the top with that super matte Mod Podge, and this will also give it a matted look, which will make it look like it's painted onto the surface. Once this is completely dry, I did grab my Waverly chalk paint in the color Plaster, and we'll do a little dry brush around the outside edges of this piece. And while doing this, I did end up doing a little bit of dry brushing over the top of the words, and if you get a little bit too much on there, you can just take a baby wipe and just wipe any excess off. For some final embellishments, I'm going to hot glue a jute bow to the top. And for the center of the bow, I'm going to hot glue a button from my button stash. And here is what our finished project looks like. I love this double-sided piece. This is going to look spectacular on my tiered tray. So while I was at the Dollar Tree, I walked by this adorable gnome bag, and I thought this was so cute. It is a reusable bag, but we're going to craft with it. So we're going to start out with one of these canvases from the Dollar Tree, and it's 11 by 14, and it's one of the ones that doesn't have the wood frame inside. Next, I'm just going to place that over the top of the bag, and using my straight edge, we're going to measure how much excess we have on each side. And there is a little over an inch on either side. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to mark a 1 inch marking, and then I ended up drawing a line down the side of the bag for 1 inch. So it gave us a little bit of an overhang for this painting. Now let's grab our scissors and we just cut the front side of this bag. Now to start, I don't cut the hanger off of it. I leave that on. And then you will be able to just set the rest of the bag aside. And in craft number 3, we'll do something with the back side of this bag. Now I'm just going to reposition the canvas over the bag and verify where I need to cut to get the hanger off of the bag. And I'm just going to cut this in one long strip because I want to reuse this hanger later. Next, let's go ahead and grab some Mod Podge. And I'm going to just take a little bit of this Mod Podge and put it onto the canvas directly. And using one of my larger brushes here, we're going to just coat the whole entire canvas. Next, we're going to go ahead and just put our little gnomes right over the top. And there'll be a little bit of overhang, and that is perfectly fine. Now I'm going to grab my roller, and I'm just going to roll over the top of the gnomes on the canvas. And once I am satisfied, I flip this canvas over, and I took 4 books and I put a book on each corner just to make sure that the canvas was sitting flat on top of this bag so that it had a better chance to adhere to everything. And I think that helped out a lot. Now, once everything is completely dry, and that was about 2 hours later, I went ahead and flipped this over again, and I'm adding some hot glue on the bottom, and I'm just going to fold up the overhang onto the back side of this canvas. Now let's reattach the hanger to our canvas. So I'm just going to take that hanger and I'm going to make sure that it's going to fit onto the canvas, and I'm just going to trim any excess off there. And we're just going to flip the canvas back over, and using our hot glue gun, we'll just reattach this to the canvas. Really like how this is coming together, but I want to add something more to it. So what we're going to do next is set this aside for a minute, and we're going to grab out some patriotic ribbons. Now, most of these ribbons I did get at the dollar store, but there are 1 or 2 in there that I did get at Walmart. For this first bigger ribbon here, I want that to be the base of my bow. So I'm going to cut these at 9-inch strips, and we're going to cut 3 of them. Well, since I couldn't find patriotic ribbon that was a little bit smaller in width at the Dollar Tree, we're just going to fold these in half and add some hot glue and make some smaller ribbons. And now we'll repeat this step on all 3 of our ribbons. And once this is complete, we can start trimming the remainder of our ribbons, and I cut them in 8.5-inch strips. Now I'm just going to arrange my messy bow, and this is the fun part. You just stack your ribbons in any order that you want. And once you have that complete, we'll go ahead and grab our pipe cleaner, and we're going to use that in the center of our ribbon. And this will attach everything together. So to cover up the pipe cleaner in the center, you can use another ribbon, add a bow, or add an embellishment. And for this one, I'm adding an embellishment using a wood star. And one thing I noticed after getting this bow all put together was that my strands, because they don't have wire in them, were just not laying the way I would like. So the nice thing about if they're cut too long, you can just go back in and give them a haircut. So that's what I did for this bow. Let's go ahead and get this bow attached to our canvas. I have to decide where I want it, and I ended up deciding on the center of the canvas, so I'm just going to add a little bit of hot glue and attach my bow. So here's how our gnome sign turns out. And wow, I think this turns out so cute. What do you think? Let me know in the comments below.